Welcome back to Reg Talk UK, the podcast that helps UK banking professionals stay sharp, stay informed, and stay ahead of regulation.
I am Alex.
And I'm Jamie. So the briefing agenda is completely stacked this week.
Yeah, it really is.
We're looking at a fundamental testing of the regulatory perimeter across the board. So we're tracking a £35.5 million FCA crackdown on a fabricated visa scheme. New FCA data showing Gen Z just blindly throwing their cash at unregulated AI chatbots.
Right.
A covert Iranian cyber attack on British critical infrastructure, and a structural shakeup targeting bailiffs and rogue builders.
And the common thread running through all these developments is the shifting perimeter of trust and institutional integrity.
Exactly.
We're seeing the safety net tested at absolute extremes. So from high-level C-suite misconduct, the top of the wealth management food chain, right down to the household resilience of everyday consumers who are facing macroeconomic pressures.
Yeah, let's start right at the top of that food chain with a spectacular integrity failure. The FCA has just dropped the hammer on 3 former senior figures at Dolfin Financial.
Oh, this one is huge.
Right. We're looking at former chief executive Therese Nagy, former finance director Maraj, and co-founder Roman Joukovski. The regulator is penalizing them for bypassing Home Office Tier 1 investor visa rules. This was between 2016 and 2019.
Yeah, and the mechanics of this £35.5 million scheme are just they're staggering when you look at the sheer audacity involved.
Oh, completely.
Because under the Tier 1 rules at the time, foreign nationals were required to invest £2 million of their own capital into genuine UK companies to secure residency.
Right, real money into the real economy.
Exactly. But Dolfin's leadership essentially fabricated a paper trail to circumvent that entirely. So instead of deploying that $2 million of personal wealth, at least 99 clients paid a flat £400,000 fee for this highly contrived circular financing structure.
It's basically the equivalent of selling VIP backstage passes that are actually just bad photocopies.
Yeah.
But doing it on an institutional scale, they created a closed-loop system where it appeared the $2 million was invested, but the capital never actually took on any genuine commercial risk in the UK.
No, not at all.
The firm and the connected immigration agents just netted the fee revenue. But what astounds me is how a regulated firm thought they could blatantly deceive both the FCA and the Home Office for 3 years.
Right.
You have to assume the compliance department was just screaming about this.
Oh, they absolutely were, which makes the governance failure even more severe, I think. Because according to the FCA's final notices, staff members raised red flags repeatedly.
Really?
Yeah, to the point where 3 members of the Tier 1 team actually handed in their resignations.
Wow.
But rather than investigate, Nagy gave false assurances to staff that the scheme would be wound down, which, it wasn't.
Of course not.
And the FCA found Joukovski was acting as an unapproved shadow director. Then the leadership team deliberately fed incomplete information to an immigration lawyer to get, favorable legal advice.
Oh, so they weaponized the legal advice.
Exactly. They weaponized it to placate the regulator and actively built a facade of compliance.
Well, the penalties definitely reflect the brazen nature of the cover-up. Nagy takes a hit of over £324,800. Maraj is fined over £122,000. And both are permanently banned from financial services.
Yeah, career ending.
Absolutely. Joukovski faces a prohibition order, too, though he has referred his decision notice to the Upper Tribunal, so findings in his case remain provisional for now. But the FCA is signaling very clearly that artificially circumventing structural rules will result in enforcement that just ends your career.
We see a stark contrast when we look at our second firm failure this week, actually. EGR Wealth Limited, they just entered administration managed by Kroll Advisory.
Right. They had agreed to a voluntary restriction on their activities back in July, didn't they?
They did, yeah. But the systemic outcome here is entirely different from Dolfin. So EGR provided discretionary investment management, but they operated under strict CSS rules, the client assets source book.
Okay.
So they never directly custodied the client money or the assets.
Right. Those assets were ring-fenced and held by a separate regulated third party.
Exactly.
So the management firm collapses, the equity goes to zero, but the client's actual underlying investments remain untouched. It is a textbook example of why the FCA's structural segregation rules exist.
It really is.
The market remains dynamic, bad business models fail, but the contagion is instantly contained.
Yeah, and it also provides a critical warning for consumers regarding claims management companies or CMCs.
Oh, yeah. They always swoop in.
They do. Whenever a wealth manager goes into administration, CMCs aggressively target the client book, and they offer to help reclaim assets for a hefty percentage cut. But because the assets are segregated or covered by the FSCS, reclaiming them is a free administrative process. So paying a third party to do what the regulatory framework already guarantees is just a complete waste of capital.
Yeah, absolutely. But that structural safety net only protects the custody of the assets, right? Not the underlying quality of the investments themselves.
No, exactly.
Which brings us to the Octopus Inheritance Tax Service, or OITs.
Ah, yes.
The Telegraph reported that 18,000 pensioners are currently frozen out of their OITs investments following a suspension of redemptions. This is fundamentally an issue of due diligence and liquidity mismatching.
Right. So to understand the failure here, we really have to look at the mechanics of business relief assets.
Okay.
Investors buy into these funds and hold the shares for 2 years, and the goal is to reduce their inheritance tax liability to zero.
Right.
However, to qualify for that relief, the fund cannot just hold cash. It has to invest in trading businesses. So OITs heavily invested in unquoted illiquid assets. They were reportedly bankrolling, failed hospitals and care homes.
Which is wild, because when you promise to lower tax bills by investing in physical healthcare infrastructure, the fundamental health of those underlying businesses is paramount.
Precisely.
If the hospital revenues dry up and the business models collapse, you cannot simply liquidate those unquoted assets on a Tuesday afternoon to meet client redemption requests.
No, you can't.
The liquidity completely vanishes, and major wealth managers like St. James's Place and Fairstone Group have already dumped the fund from their panels because the underlying toxicity ruins the entire proposition.
Yeah, the octopus fallout is a classic example of human underwriting and physical asset valuation failing. But, the regulatory perimeter is now being aggressively stretched by technologies trying to remove human judgment altogether.
Right, moving into the digital space.
Exactly. HM Treasury, led by City Minister Lucy Rigby, has just handed the Bank of England a new secondary objective.
Oh, I saw this.
Yeah, it's to actively support innovation in payment systems and digital money. So that encompasses stablecoins, tokenization, and distributed ledger technology.
Which is a massive shift. I mean, the Bank of England's entire institutional identity is built on guarding financial stability and mitigating risk.
Yeah, historically.
Threadneedle Street has always viewed crypto and tokenization as just a pure contagion risk. And now, HM Treasury is forcing the primary risk mitigator to actively build the rails for digital settlement so London doesn't lose ground to jurisdictions like Singapore or Switzerland.
It's a real tightrope they're walking with this new mandate, because the innovation objective is strictly subordinate to the primary financial stability objective.
Of course.
If stablecoins threaten a liquidity crisis, the bank will crush them regardless of the innovation mandate.
Right.
But this policy shift forces the bank to move beyond just institutional caution. They can no longer just say no to digital finance. They basically have to proactively facilitate a competitive landscape and report annually to Parliament on their progress.
Well, while the bank figures out how to regulate digital money, retail consumers are already throwing their capital at unregulated digital advisors.
Oh, the AI data.
Yes. The FCA released data showing 56% of young investors aged 18 to 40 trust AI tools for investment advice over traditional media or financial influencers.
Which is a terrifying regulatory blind spot.
It is, because 44% mistakenly believe general AI chatbots are regulated, and 32% think the FSCS will compensate them if that AI gives them bad advice.
Yeah, the technology has entirely outpaced the consumer's understanding of the legal safety net, because large language models operate on stochastic probability.
Right.
They generate text based on historical patterns, not deterministic financial modeling. So they hallucinate.
Yeah.
Relying on an unregulated general-purpose chatbot for asset allocation is incredibly dangerous because the liability sits entirely with the user.
It is like relying on a sat-nav that doesn't know cliff edges exist.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it might get the direction right based on past data, but it cannot foresee structural market shifts. But let's look at the commercial reality for retail banks here. There is a massive demographic that clearly prefers engaging with a prompt interface rather than, booking an appointment with a human advisor.
Yeah.
So if a bank builds a proprietary closed-loop AI tool to capture this market, they immediately take on the liability under the consumer duty.
Yeah, deploying a proprietary AI advice tool means the bank must guarantee good consumer outcomes. And testing an LLM to ensure it never hallucinates bad advice across millions of unique user prompts is just a formidable compliance hurdle.
Huge.
The commercial upside of capturing that Gen Z market is massive, But the operational risk of a generative model breaching consumer duty guidelines is currently keeping bank risk committees awake at night.
Speaking of keeping executives awake at night, let's talk about the future of digital banking and a present-day pioneer facing severe headwinds, Atom Bank.
Right.
Mark Mullen is stepping down after a decade as CEO of the app-based lender, and CFO Andrew Marshall is taking over. This follows a highly publicized failed auction process where Atom abandoned attempts to secure a valuation between 600 million and 1 billion pounds due to a lack of firm bids.
Yeah, Atom Bank was the UK's first digital-only bank, but their growth has really lagged significantly behind neobanks like Monzo and Starling.
Right.
So, with the M&A route closed off for now, they're pivoting hard toward capital efficiency. Specifically, they're in deep negotiations with the Prudential Regulation Authority to secure approval for an internal ratings-based model.
Right, an IRB model. For those tracking bank balance sheets, moving from a standardized approach to an IRB model completely changes the capital stack.
It does.
Under the standardized approach, the regulator dictates the risk weight of a mortgage or loan. An IRB model allows a bank to use its own historical data and internal risk models to prove their specific lending book is less risky.
And lower risk weights mean the bank is required to hold less regulatory capital against its loan book.
Yeah.
So that newly freed up Tier 1 capital can be deployed to write new business, which immediately boosts the return on equity.
Right.
It is a pure balance sheet optimization play, and it's designed to artificially juice the firm's valuation and profitability metrics ahead of any future liquidity event or IPO.
If you're finding this useful, don't forget to follow Reg Talk UK on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube. It really helps us reach more banking professionals like you. So while neobanks fight with the PRA over internal risk models, the government is stepping in to fix the physical, everyday financial harms ravaging household balance sheets. Andy Burnham has rolled out an initiative targeting cowboy builders and rogue bailiffs.
Yeah.
For builders, they are backing a new approved code and launching a trusted payments app that functions as a digital escrow service.
And the escrow mechanism directly neutralizes the upfront payment fraud model. UK consumers lost over £10.3 billion in 2024 on home improvement fraud.
Wow.
Yeah. By locking the capital in the app and only releasing payments when specific project milestones are met, the power dynamic shifts entirely back to the consumer.
That's smart.
And alongside this, the government is finally giving teeth to the Enforcement Conduct Board regarding private bailiffs.
Right. Mandatory accreditation is the key here. If a private debt collection firm in England or Wales fails to maintain ECB accreditation, they lose their legal certificate to operate.
Exactly.
Martin Lewis actually called this a genuine step forward for vulnerable households. But let's look at the macroeconomic reality for a second.
Okay.
Implementing an escrow app for builders and policing bailiffs, it feels a bit like putting a plaster on a structurally compromised pipe. I mean, the overarching issue driving consumer vulnerability is the broader cost of living and housing crisis.
It is, but the macro data from Reuters suggests the underlying economic pipe might finally be stabilizing.
You think?
Well, the August flash PMI showed the fastest private sector expansion in 4 months. Inflation appears to be peaking around 3.5%, heavily influenced by natural gas pricing, and wage growth is demonstrably softening.
Okay, so the immediate implication is that the Bank of England has the economic cover to hold rates steady through the autumn.
Exactly, which prevents further shocks to the mortgage market.
But the tension in housing policy is escalating rapidly. You have Angela Rayner pushing a massive supply-side garden grab policy to force the construction of 1.5 million homes by 2029.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have the Prime Minister's historical support for rent controls hanging over the market, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies issued a very sharp warning this week on the mechanics of rent controls.
Yeah, the IFS warning highlights a classic economic feedback loop. If you implement hard rent controls, you artificially compress rental yields.
Right.
So institutional landlords and developers immediately sell off housing stock, supply crashes, and then the rents for any new tenants entering the market just skyrocketed.
Yeah, so the government is trying to incentivize developers to build 1.5 million homes while simultaneously threatening the regulatory environment that makes holding those assets profitable.
Exactly.
It is a highly volatile policy mix ahead of the autumn budget.
It really is.
Now, we need to zoom out from domestic policy to national resilience because the threat landscape facing critical infrastructure is escalating. The Telegraph published an exclusive revealing that Iranian state-sponsored hackers successfully shut down a small British power station for 4 days.
Yeah, and the government emphasized that this was a minor outage isolated from the wider grid, but the incident proves the capability has been deployed successfully on British soil.
Right.
The UK is facing a sophisticated asymmetric warfare threat. State actors like Iran are no longer relying solely on their own intelligence agencies. They are increasingly recruiting low-level criminal proxies off platforms like Telegram.
It is the execution of the Mosaic Doctrine, right?
Exactly.
Hostile states pay a fractured network of unaffiliated cybercriminals to execute breaches or physical intimidation. It provides the state with plausible deniability while keeping their fingerprints off the immediate attack. And this active, asymmetric threat is exactly why the government launched that rather uncomfortable public awareness campaign recently. Urging citizens to stockpile battery radios, candles, and 3 days' worth of water.
It's intense. The risk to national infrastructure has really moved from theoretical tabletop exercises to active deployment.
Absolutely.
And, while compliance and operational resilience teams are dealing with state-sponsored cyber threats, they're also managing a bizarre internal cultural fracture.
Oh, the quiet vacationing.
Yes, Fortune magazine reported this week on a massive surge in quiet vacationing.
This is wild. 4 in 10 millennials are reportedly taking secret holidays. They're traveling abroad while remaining logged on remotely and using mouse jigglers to appear active.
Unbelievable.
You have to respect the absolute audacity, to be honest. But the commercial impact is tangible. Management surveys show a 10% dip in summer productivity, with a third of managers claiming the slump directly resulted in missed commercial deals.
Yeah, and it creates a novel operational and compliance risk, too.
How so?
Well, having unregulated staff logging into secure banking networks from unverified international IP addresses while sitting on a beach, it creates data protection nightmares.
Oh, right, of course.
It points to a severe breakdown in trust between management suspicion and employee burnout, and it requires HR and risk teams to completely rethink remote work surveillance.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. What are the key actionable takeaways for the risk, legal, and compliance professionals listening to this briefing?
Okay, so first, the FCA is showing absolute zero tolerance for executive integrity failures. The Dolfin visa bans demonstrate that artificially engineering compliance will result in career termination.
Right.
Second, the Bank of England as an NSU mandate means the door is opening for digital settlement, but legacy banks must approach tokenization with rigorous capital controls. Third, your retail clients are already seeking financial advice from unregulated LLMs. Firms must urgently educate their base on the limits of FSCS protection. And finally, mandatory rules for debt collection are active, so compliance teams must audit their third-party enforcement partners immediately to ensure ECB accreditation.
A brilliant summary. And it leaves me with one final thought. As retail banks race to build these closed-loop FCA-compliant AI advisory tools to capture Gen Z, who exactly holds the bag when the algorithm eventually hallucinates its first £1 million mistake? That's all from us this week. Thanks for listening to Reg Talk UK. Until next time, stay sharp and stay compliant.